Hi, everyone, and welcome to God's Plan, Your Part, a podcast where our goal is to read the entire Bible in a year, seeking to understand God's plan of redemption while discovering daily and practically your part in it.
All right, welcome back. Today we're looking at Genesis 41 to 42. We basically get a chapter of dreams, and then we get kind of a dramatic turn of events. I think the original folks would have seen it that way. So, what'd you think, Jenny?
So last episode we talked about how our part was relying on God, not others, and Joseph put a lot of stock into like the hope that this cupbearer would mention his name to Pharaoh. So I think what's cool is that Joseph's deliverance does not rely on this guy just initially, the cupbearer, just saying, oh, hey, by the way, when I was down in prison, there was this guy. God actually gives Pharaoh the dream. So God is providing in a way that is kind of unexpected because he gives Pharaoh the dream that he can't interpret, and he needs someone to interpret it for him. So I guess in a roundabout way, the cupbearer does play a part in it. But if it wasn't for God prompting Pharaoh in this dream, then the story might look a lot different. I think that's kind of cool.
It is really obvious, like, how present God is in this whole thing. And 2 years passed, by the way. So Joseph is just in, the Bible says, a pit. Like, when they brought him out of the pit, he needed a haircut and a shower. So a long time passes, and we've seen that multiple times. A lot of time passed, I think, for Job. A lot of time passed, I think, for Abraham. Like, a lot of time passes, and God takes his time to do what God plans to do. And so, I mean, you think about Joseph being sold into slavery. That was a long time ago.
Which actually, I wonder, like, how much of this time, like, God is just preparing Joseph's heart for his ability to interpret more.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool to think of.
And
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so we move into this section where Joseph comes and he interprets Pharaoh's dreams for him. And I feel like really comforts Pharaoh to the point where he puts him in so much, like, in a position of so much responsibility.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I talked about how there's a lot of comparisons between Joseph and Daniel. The same thing happens in both stories where, like, Joseph essentially has the power of the kingdom. Like, Pharaoh is like, hey, you're in charge of everything. The only thing you can't have is my throne, but still do everything.
Yeah.
So it's really odd, and it's very like similar in Daniel's case. Like, the king in Daniel's case is like, hey, you're basically in charge, but, like, not my throne, though.
I still make the final call.
So what's interesting is there's these dreams. Daniel says because he has two similar dreams, it cements the fact that God is going to do what God is going to do. Daniel is able to wisely discern that there's going to be 7 years of lots of food and then 7 years of almost none. And when he decrees this, again, think about how much time. It's a lot of time. It's 14 years.
Right, yep.
It's at least 7 years until they even know if what he said is true. So in chapter 41, verse 38, Pharaoh says something really interesting. He said, "This says, and Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are." What's really interesting about that is, it's possible we could look at this chapter and say that the Holy Spirit is in Joseph, helping him do these things. It's also possible that Pharaoh is a pagan, and he's just speaking in pagan terms, like, oh, there's the Spirit of God in you.
It's like a magic man.
It's kind of tough. I could see both sides of what scholars think about this particular verse, but we will see, and this is why I'm calling it out, we will see people who God's Spirit falls on them and they're able to do unique things. And the reason I call it out is that in the Old Testament, there's something very unique between Old and New Testament. The Spirit of God falls on people specifically in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, which is the new covenant that we are now under, the Spirit is in all believers. That is something unique that we have, and it's possible that Joseph was actually functioning in that in Genesis.
Well, excuse me, as we move out of the dreams, we see Joseph's brothers re-entering the scene because they too are impacted by this like crazy famine, this lack of food. So in what I noticed that was, excuse me, what I noticed that was most interesting to me is you can see this like constant struggle in Joseph's heart. Like there's so much of him where you think, oh shoot, he's going to go off the deep end, and he like starts putting people in handcuffs or whatever. And then he backs off a little bit and is merciful and gives them food and lets them go home with all their money. And then you say, like, oh shoot, he's doing great. And then he turns around and he's like, nope, I'm keeping one of your brothers, and you also have to bring the other one back. So like you can see like this, I think, like this internal struggle of like trying to like justly deal with this situation, but also remembering like grace upon grace upon grace. Like, it's so interesting to me. Like, you can see there's just, like, real humanity inside of this, what seems to be a very good guy.
Imagine the real humanity. I mean, imagine that you are sold into slavery by your sibling, and then they think you're dead. They have no reason at all. I mean, you can actually see that in the text, that they're like, well, there's 12 of us, but one of them died. Like, they have no reason to believe that they're standing before their brother, but Joseph knows. Imagine the emotions. I mean, maybe God revealed this to him. I don't know.
Well, there's even a moment where it says like he turned around and just wept. Like,
no, I'm sure, because it's probably like,
how do you hold that in?
He probably misses his family. He actually names one of his sons to recognize the fact that his family is like out of his mind, and then immediately his family is back in the picture.
Right.
So it's really interesting. There's some really interesting things in Joseph's life, but I think
turn of events.
the most compelling thing is that he's so obedient to the Lord.
I think something funny too, as we were reading this, like I know how the story goes, but once Jacob finds out that they have to take Benjamin, and he's like, there is no way you're taking them. Parts of me are like, oh, but you have to send him because otherwise they're not going to get, I think it's Simeon that he takes, right? Simeon is kind of like held hostage. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because the last time we saw Simeon was running around just cutting up people on behalf of Dinah. So Simeon's a little wild. We also see Reuben.
Reuben. He has a special spot in my heart.
So Reuben is the one that was like, I don't think we should kill our brother.
Yeah.
And then he's also the one that like tore his clothes because he was so either sad because Joseph was gone or sad because Jacob would be mad. But it is Reuben that says, this is verse 22, and Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? So it's obvious this is like present in his mind. But you did not listen, so now there comes a reckoning for his blood.
This is like his I told you so moment.
Well, yeah, he's just like, oh my word, guys, I said we should not do this. And so he has a guilty conscience.
Yeah. And it's carried over for many, 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 many years.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So we'll see how this plays out. But ultimately, remember that God is in control, and he is taking care of his people, and he's going to do it in a pretty fantastic way.
So I think your part for today is that inner struggle that we see with Joseph, where like so much of your sinful nature and your like humanity wants to just lash out, but then there's that part that God is called to be like unique and different from that. And I think that can happen to us a lot today, where we're just like ready to just like punch it or like kick it to somebody in a way that our sinful nature desires, but God calls us to something so different, to have grace and mercy for those that hurt us or persecute us or I guess harm us in a way, just like what happened to Joseph. And so I guess a good thing to think about today is that the Lord requires a lot of us, even when you are faced with people who you don't appreciate or who bring harm to you in any way, shape, or form. So remember that. Give grace where it is needed today to the people around you. Thanks for joining us, and we will be back tomorrow.
See you later. Genesis chapter 41. After 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile. And behold, there came up out of the Nile 7 cows, attractive and plump, and they fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows, ugly and thin, came up out of the Nile after them, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly thin cows ate up the 7 attractive plump cows. And Pharaoh awoke, and he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain, plump and good, were growing on the stalk. And behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So in the morning his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today. When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put me and the chief baker in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, we dreamed on the same night, he and I, and having a dream with its own interpretation. A young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. When we told him, he interpreted our dreams to us, giving interpretation to each man according to his dream. And as he interpreted to us, so it came about. I was restored to my office, and the baker was hanged. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, Behold, in my dream I was standing on the banks of the Nile. 7 cows, plump and attractive, came up out of the Nile and fed in the reed grass. 7 other cows came after them, poor and very ugly and thin, such as I had never seen in all the land of Egypt. And the thin, ugly cows ate up the first 7 plump cows. But when they had eaten them, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were still as ugly as at the beginning. Then I awoke. I also saw in my dream 7 ears growing on one stalk, full and good. 7 ears, withered and thin, blighted by the east wind, sprouted after them. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. And I told it to the magicians, but there was no one who would explain it to me. Then Joseph said to the Pharaoh, The dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blighted by the east wind are also 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout the land of Egypt, but after them there will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow, for it will be very severe. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. Now therefore let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities and let them keep it. That food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. This proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants, and Pharaoh said to his servants, Can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, Since God has shown you all of this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, See, I have set you over the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him ride in his 2nd chariot, and they called out before him, Bow the knee. Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphenath-Paneah, and he gave him in marriage to Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh the king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 plentiful years the earth produced abundantly, and he gathered up all the food of these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt, and put the food in the cities. He put in every city the food from the fields around it. And Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bore them to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, For he said, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. The name of the second one he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come. As Joseph had said, there was famine in all the lands, but in the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, Go to Joseph. What he says to do, you do. So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth.
When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, Why do you look at one another? He said, Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land, and Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. Where do you come from? He said. They said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food. And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. And he said to them, You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land. They said to him, No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. And they said, We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. But Joseph said to them, It is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from this place until your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother, while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. And on the 3rd day Joseph said to them, Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry the grain for the famine to your households, and bring your youngest brother to me. So your words will be verified, you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, In truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged for us and we did not listen. That is why the distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, Did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Then he turned away from them and wept, and he returned to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, and to replace every man's money back in his sack, and give them provisions for their journey. This was done for them. Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. And as one of them opened his sack to give the donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money in the mouth of the sack. He said to his brothers, My money has been put back. Here it is in the mouth of my sack. At this their hearts failed them, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, What is it that God has done to us? When they came to Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, they told him what had happened to them, saying, The man, the lord of the land, spoke roughly to us, and took us to be spies of the land. But we said to him, We are honest men, we have never been spies. We are the 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest to this day is with our father in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the lord of the land, said to us, By this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, and take grain for the famine to your households, and go on your way. Bring your youngest brother to me. Then I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men, and I will deliver your brother to you, and you shall trade in the land. As they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin? All this has come against me. Then Reuben said to his father, Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring them back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. But he said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.